Generational wealth maybe isn't about bazillions of dollars in the bank, but it is about getting to find a path that is nurturing and fulfilling and creative and authentic, because they may not be the next surgeon or engineer or NASA scientist or basketball star or prima ballerina, and they'll probably be the happier for not having to pretend that they are. Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome to another nuanced conversation here. I am Kiva Schuler, the founder of the Jai Institute for Parenting, and I am being joined by Rebecca, Lyddon, our director of education, and Molly, my dog, who's going to keep wanting to say hello through this entire video. I have a feeling. So one of the things that I think is not frustrating, challenging is a better word, challenging for people to hold in this conversation around peaceful parenting and gentle parenting is it is so gray. There aren't prescriptive, do exactly this, don't do exactly that. Some things may evolve from day to day. Boundaries are fluid. All of it is constantly in motion. In my book, The Peaceful Parenting Revolution, I have this quote, which I'm going to butcher, but it says something like, parenting is a dance, meeting the moment with our presence. And that moment changes over and over again. And so in this conversation series, we're exploring some of the values or beliefs that we have as parents that can live in this gray zone. So in the last video, if you missed it, go check that out. It was all about respect. And today we're going to be talking about achievement, especially here in Western culture and many cultures, in fact, this idea that it is our role as parents to get our children to achieve their potential creates a lot of pressure, a lot of conflict, a lot of stress and worry in homes, and is also true. And so that is what we're going to be talking about today. And so Rebecca, just, you are someone who speaks to so many parents, trains so many of our incredible parenting coaches. I'm curious how you address this when this comes up in family dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's fascinating to break it down into age groups. I'm seeing parents' urgency, insecurity, anxiety already driving the car when their child is 3 or 4 or 5. If they're not speaking as fluently as their peers or reading chapter books when they're 6, and the random third cousin of your neighbor's sister is. And I think a core fear is that a parent isn't doing enough to help their child succeed. Therefore, their child is going to get left behind and not have belonging. If they lack actualization of their potential or full expression of success, they're not going to be good enough to fit into a peer group, which is a really interesting social, emotional dynamic, let alone going into adolescence or early adulthood and getting a job and being successful. People will snowball all the way decades into the future. But the question really is for us as peaceful parenting revolutionaries is, what would it take to feel peaceful in our parenting? It might not be comfortable to do this hard work because we do have responsibility to model for our children what it looks like to have self-discipline, to make tough choices even if you don't want to do it, but you do it because you know it's going to be in service of your growth and your evolution. And what are developmentally appropriate ways to connect with our children when we notice they're lacking motivation, they're lacking effort, they're not showing up to their commitments, they're disengaged, disconnected, or disassociating from the requirements or responsibilities of their life? That protects the relationship, not protects their child getting somewhere over the relationship.
There's so much to unpack in what you just said. What was really coming to mind is, yes, that fear of our children fitting into their social group, but also our own fear of being judged, of other people thinking whatever they're going to think because our child isn't yet doing the thing or isn't hitting as high a bar or isn't, an Olympic gymnast by the age of 6. There's so much packed into this achievement bubble that it really is difficult to unravel where our authentic motivation is coming from to push our child versus support them. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And what's really fascinating about what you're saying is it's just the next level from the parent-centric point of view of fearing for our own belonging. We're securing belonging into a peer group by our children's accomplishments. And if they're not accomplished or successful, that compromises our fitting in with other adults.
Yeah.
And then bringing it to how can we intrinsically, what would it take for us to speak our child's language so they can get to know their own intrinsic motivation, their own process, so they can trust themselves to be lifelong learners, to be self-directed, self-motivated, and also have the inner wisdom to know what's not correct for them and to stop halfway through if it's not correct for them, or to be willing to have a failure experience to move forward and take that as an experimental learning opportunity.
Yeah. It's, I think it's for me when I want to just out myself. I am someone who has struggled with this the whole time. And my kids are 16 and 18 now. My son is, hearing back from colleges as we speak. I was raised in a home by a single mother, and the message I got early was, thou shall go to an Ivy League school or be disowned. Thou shall be, get all, as a dancer growing up, get all the parts, getting driven into New York City to go to auditions when I was 12 and 13 years old. I mean, I had the epitome of the, your achievements define you mother. And so, of course, this is one that I've had to grapple with really intensely as a mom because that programming runs so deep. And so for me, I've had to learn that when that feeling comes up of like, they're not working hard enough, they're not doing enough, they're not like captain or star or whatever of anything, that it's a notice to myself to think about like, what's really going on here? Is this about me or is this about them? And taking that pause, because it's entrenched in so many of our family cultures. So many of us.
Oh my, I'm feeling the stress of a 12, 13-year-old being driven into New York City. And what's interesting, Kiva, if you resonate, I'll hear this very often too, where people over-identify with the gift of that upbringing while denying the shadow or the wounding of that upbringing, where if my mom hadn't have done that, I would not be where I am today, which could be true.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile that?
All of the things that we talk about here, it's the both and, right? Yes, I, had the privilege of an extraordinary education. Yes, I had the privilege of performing, in ridiculous places at a young age, and perfectionism and stress and, crushing, disappointment in myself when I failed. And so all of that is true. I was clear that when I became a parent, I did not want to make, this is going to sound weird. I've said to myself since they were young, I'm going to give the kids a gift of not making them my purpose.
Sure, I understand.
They do not owe me, because I felt like I had to do all this for my mom, right? They don't owe me that.
Okay.
Their achievements are theirs, but it's a tangled web. And we've been through various iterations of it over the years, but I've learned a lot along the way about myself. And I think that's really the opportunity to look at with this whole conversation around achievement is, where am I trying to fill a hole inside of me versus empowering this wholly sovereign human being who has their own talents, their own dreams, their own desires, their own proclivities to follow their own path.
Yeah, when I hear you say I won't make my children my purpose, I immediately interpreted that as I won't make my children my project. It's like really honoring the sovereignty. And it's interesting, if you were to not be in this self-awareness, self-boundaried, when you can be able to really control your behaviors with your children, how that would impact their self-esteem, their identity, their self-worth, their trust in themselves, their intrinsic motivation. If it was more of a projection of, you need to do this so I feel good about myself because you are the extension of my success, worth, and accomplishment. Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, we didn't mean this to be a Kiva story.
I can't help it.
So, I'll make this story short, but, my kids had gone to a very small farm school through 8th grade and then moved to public high school. My son has never been particularly socially adept. He's a child who would much rather be in trees and talking to rocks than humans. And so he moved into this huge public school. He felt like he was an alien who landed on Mars. He did not understand the language. He did not understand the culture. He did not understand why he needed to learn this way and sit in a chair. His whole world got rocked. And my reaction at that time, that year, dug in. Go join more clubs. You like BJJ, so you should be on the wrestling team. What are the hardest classes? Like, let's get your mind going. It wasn't from, he's a mathy kid, right? So like he needed that. He was bored. And I started to be my mother. I'm sorry, Mom, we love you. And and he deteriorated rapidly. He started having panic attacks. And I mean, like, big physical, he's 6 feet tall. So when his physical panic attacks were violent in a way, we, went down the path of neuropsych testing and all of this. And a couple of years later, someone asked me, what happened? Like, why did that happen? What caused him to be so anxious? And I had this moment and I was like, it was me. It was me. And as soon as I recognized what I was doing and took my hands off the steering wheel and just allowed him his experience, right? Like, this is a challenging time. He's getting some not great grades. He's not fitting in socially or making friends. And this is his journey. And it is not for me to protect him, to push him. My job is to be here and have space for him to get the support, the affection, the empathy that he needed. He, took a while, and then COVID happened, a lot of things, but he found his way. It took some time and he found his way. And I think that's the price of, for those of us who have that idea that it's our job to get our children to succeed and achieve and the cost very often is their mental health. And that's why this conversation is worth exploring, because I don't think there's anything worth putting our child through that level of stress, adrenaline, cortisol, mental health challenges, and feeling so lost.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I've got many students here at Dry and personal clients that are trying to navigate the burnout that their children are facing from being in accomplishment culture since kindergarten. And these teens are to a place of complete adrenal shutdown and paralyzation where they can't get off of the couch, not because they're lazy, but their body is literally shutting down to the stress of needing to accomplish and strive and be in executive functioning for 9 hours a day, go to soccer practice, come home, do homework, clean up, go to bed, like they're, in a factory, and it's not sustainable. And you know, feedback that I hear from the wider culture is actually that peaceful parenting is what is making these children weak.
Mm.
If they were raised with more force, stronger, stricter discipline, corporal punishment, they would be able to psychologically withstand the stress of accomplishment culture, success culture. And it's heartbreaking to hear that that's how adults are trying to cope with their experiences of young
Or
people.
interpreting the behavior that is prevalent.
Like it's a personal failure that their nervous system is shutting down, and it's the result of not strict and firm enough parenting. Because let's bring consequences in here. If my child was not doing their homework, was not following through on their commitments, was getting failing grades or less than expected grades in the home, our philosophy here that is rooted in science, this is not an opinion, is the consequences piece, meaning presence, empathy, acceptance, communication, and exploring solutions collaborative. And our students and clients who are shifting away from, if my child is getting failing grades, they don't get to leave the house anymore and see their friends. Shifting from social isolation, thinking that that will motivate their child to do their homework so they can get their social needs met. We're moving in a way toward, help me understand what's going on. Something must be getting in your way. Is it your phone? Is it your video games? Let's be honest. We got to be real with each other here.
Yeah.
And let's have a creative conversation so you're feeling supported. It's essentially, how can I help you? Because this could be showing us that something's missing.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked before we started recording about grounding our ideas around our children's performance with values, and that values become the teaching mechanism to process the natural consequences of decisions and choices. So when a child, for example, doesn't do their homework and doesn't study for the test, the natural consequence is they get a bad grade. Rather than grounding the child for the bad grade, we can ground into the lesson of education being an important value in this family.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking to the opportunities that education brings in age-appropriate ways.
Mm-hmm.
But, kids feel bad enough, right? When they fail, when they're not.
It's a terrible feeling.
They do not need us to pile on to what is already an incredibly uncomfortable situation. It's not that we're excusing it or Pollyanning it. It's that with compassion and guidance, we can do what you just said. How can I support you? What needs to shift? What new agreements can we make? Do we need a tutor? And also, regardless of your performance, you have my undying love, support, and affection.
I mean, that's healing for me in all of my teenage years to just know that I'm not a disappointment if I'm not a perfect execution of every single test and assignment, and that most of all, there's the support that I need if I'm struggling, and being able to communicate, I'm struggling and I'm needing more support. Can you help me? that's we got to break it down. Accomplishment is not just academic, it's social, it's emotional, it's psychological, it's relational, it's the ability to communicate, to know yourself, to be devoted to your own personal values while holding the developmental context that it's on a continuum depending on temperament, personality, and family culture. But the adolescent is wired to rebel in whatever way that looks like for them. And that doesn't always mean the taboo cultural smoking and drinking and sneaking out, although it very well could be. It's really at the root of it. It's rebelling against the personas that the adults around them have pigeonholed them into. And they're rebelling into more authenticity and self-directed, self-centeredness.
I mean, it's curious because, I learned this painful lesson with Miles and some different lessons with Charlotte, over the last couple of years when they were like 13, 14. And I just gave them over to themselves. I really decided that I was going to trust them to lead their lives, to lead their bodies, to lead their choices, to lead their results. And I have not experienced rebellion in the way that you describe. And I wonder if it's because I kind of gave up the ruse that I had any, like these are now two people with automobiles and driver's licenses, and
Right.
they are wholly formed humans in many, many ways. Of course, they're still my children, and I'm here. I consider myself the mothership now, so they can fly far, and I will always be here for refueling. But that rebellion piece, I'm really grateful, has not been something that I've experienced in the last couple of years. And I think hearing what you're saying, it's probably because I stopped making my agenda their agenda.
And the quality of attachment says a lot about that transition, although it sounds like it wasn't as effortless as just simply lifting your hands. It's grief and deep pain and
grief, mourning, resisting, righteousness, anger, frustration. We don't often let go until this is just a life experience that I've had over and over. We don't often let go until it's too painful to keep holding on.
I'd say that that's pretty accurate.
That was a lot of around the conversation. I think what I would offer is some takeaways is when we get that feeling of needing to push our kids to achieve, whether it's in education, athletics, socially, like you need to, I'm going to use the word friendly loosely. Someone I used to live in the neighborhood was so focused on her children being popular, right? That's another version of
social accomplishment,
that it's an invitation to look inward and see where that motivation is coming from. And is it from a lack or from a value? And if it's from a value, then we want to start to teach our children that value and how to make decisions from that grounded place. Number one. Number two, I mean, all of us can decide to opt out in a myriad of ways. I just was joking with Rebecca that my daughter made me a PowerPoint in the 6th grade about why she should be allowed to stop taking ballet lessons. And it was an impressive, logical, well thought out presentation. And I thought, well, sheesh, this is obviously really important to her. So where can we give our children more authority, self-authority in choosing their path? Because I believe that given some space, all of us, every human being has creative capacity, has intellectual curiosity. But those things can't be found if it's being forced. I don't think.
It's confusing when it's being forced because you don't know is this mine? Is this theirs? And, it's the people grow up and pay lots and lots of money to find their true self again and to redefine accomplishment and success for their own self. And what if we were instilling that from the beginning,
Yeah.
really helping to build that up? I
Yeah.
think my takeaway is sit with your definition of accomplishment and see how narrow your lens is. See how conditioned your lens is. Is this really your definition, or is this what's been handed down to you? And see if you can expand it. It's not just academic, social, emotional, relational, psychological,
Artistic,
spiritual.
peaceful.
Yeah.
So
Well,
many.
there's a lot, there's many. You can
Oh,
make a wheel. I'll probably make that chart later today.
yeah.
So I'll send it to you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with the perspective of older children, what I can offer is given space, they'll find their thing. I'll never forget the day that I walked into Charlotte's room and she had ordered, a stack of books this high that included like Sylvia Plath and,
Oh,
just like the most exquisite books that I probably would have paid her to read in earlier years, but she actually just found them on her own and came into her avid readership on her own.
it's so satisfying to see.
It's so beautiful, or Miles who found his way to the wood shop at, his dad's friend's house and now that's his happy place is a wood shop.
I appreciate these examples because it's almost like give our children access. This is a very homeschool technique. It's called strewing. Give them lots of access to experiment and play around with and let go of, to see when I accomplish or succeed something in a particular medium, which one gratifies me and fulfills me. It helps me feel more connected to myself. I like that.
I like that too. I mean, isn't that what we all want?
Yes.
To find a life of dharma, right? Like our work being our purpose. It makes me so sad. I was just on vacation, as said, and listening to conversations around me of so many people suffering in their work and suffering in their day-to-day lives, not wanting to go back to real life. And it was heartbreaking to me because we only get this one life. And if we program our children early and often that they need to sacrifice and compromise their passions, their purpose, their sense of fulfillment in the name of work, like suffering work, that is the path they will follow. And that is the path to a very, I think, unsatisfying life. And I say that with a lot of empathy and compassion for the reality of that choice for so many people, and understanding the privilege that I have of doing this work, which you and I just live, breathe, bolt out of bed in the morning. I could not wait to come back to work today. That is a gift that even if we don't have in our own lives, we might start to offer to our children as a new kind of wealth creation. That generational wealth maybe isn't about like bazillions of dollars in the bank, but is about getting to find a path that is nurturing and fulfilling and creative and authentic to the child that we have, because they may not be the next surgeon or engineer or NASA scientist or basketball star or prima ballerina. And they'll probably be the happier for not having to pretend that they are. Any final thoughts to share?
Oh, I'd say surround yourself with at least one person who thinks outside of the box. Even myself living a self-employed life, entrepreneurial life, my husband, self-employed, entrepreneurial, our kids going to a very alternative school, I can still get stuck in the she's not this yet, he's not this yet. What is going to happen if this and that? And having a reality check from people that I trust to help me get more grounded and less fearful is so essential.
I love that. Yeah, great advice. Just one person. Oh, that feels really
Yeah,
so
like
good.
a coach.
Unanticipated advertisement for
Yeah,
our
I mean,
coaches, or if you want to help people do this work, hey,
yeah, there.
I'm being
Hey.
a parenting coach here. All right, everyone. This has been, I hope, an enriching conversation for you. Like all of these, there's no right, wrong, black, white, up, down, left, right. It is nuanced, it is gray, it is evolving. And I think the biggest thing that I heard from you, Rebecca, was taking the opportunity to give our children a voice in this conversation.
Thank you, Kiva.
All right, everyone. Bye for now. We'll see you next time.